Midnight train horror. They say the train runs only once a year, on a moonless night when the fog is thick enough to swallow the world whole. No one knows where it comes from or where it goes, but those who have ridden it are never seen again. It's an urban legend, a ghost story told to scare children and thrill seekers. I never believed in such nonsense until I found myself on that cursed train. It started on a typical evening. I was returning home after a late shift, tired and impatient to crawl into bed. The subway station was nearly deserted, the few remaining commuters looking just as weary as I felt. The flickering fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting long shadows on the grimy tiles. I checked the time. The last train should have arrived by now, but the platform remained eerily empty. I felt a shiver of unease but brushed it off, blaming the long hours I'd worked. When the train finally arrived, it was a relief. The silver cars screeched to a halt, the doors sliding open with a hiss. I stepped inside, barely noticing that no one else boarded with me. The car was strangely empty. No passengers, no advertisements, not even the usual grime that coats every surface in the subway. It was almost too clean, like a new car that had never been used. I found a seat by the window, staring out into the dark tunnel as the doors closed and the train lurched forward. The ride was smooth, almost unnaturally so. The usual rattles and squeaks of the subway were absent, replaced by an odd silence that seemed to stretch on forever. I pulled out my phone to pass the time, but there was no signal, not even the usual spotty service you get underground. The clock on the screen was frozen, stuck at the time I'd entered the train. I frowned, glancing around the empty car. Something felt off, but I couldn't put my finger on it. The silence was oppressive, pressing down on me until I felt like I couldn't breathe. I wanted to get up, to move to another car, but my body felt heavy, rooted to the seat. That's when the lights flickered. It was just a brief flash, barely noticeable, but it was enough to make my heart skip a beat. The train seemed to slow, the tunnel outside becoming a blur of shadowy shapes. I leaned closer to the window, squinting into the darkness, and that's when I saw them. Faces. Pale, ghostly faces pressed against the glass, their eyes wide and staring. I jerked back, a gasp caught in my throat. The train sped up again, the faces disappearing into the darkness as quickly as they had appeared. My mind raced, trying to make sense of what I had seen. I told myself it was just a trick of the light, a reflection, but deep down, I knew better. The train continued on, the silence growing heavier with each passing second. My heart pounded in my chest, the sound loud in the stillness. I wanted to get off, to escape this nightmare, but the doors remained firmly shut, and the train showed no signs of stopping. The lights flickered again, this time longer, plunging the car into darkness for a few heartbeats before they snapped back on. When they did, I wasn't alone anymore. A figure stood at the far end of the car, shrouded in shadow. I couldn't make out any details, just the vague shape of a person. They were too still, too silent, and I felt a chill run down my spine. I wanted to call out, to ask who they were, but the words caught in my throat. The train shuddered, the lights flickering once more. The figure moved closer, though I hadn't seen it take a step. It was just there, suddenly halfway down the car. My breath hitched, panic bubbling up inside me. I glanced at the door, calculating my chances of running, but before I could move, the lights went out completely. I was plunged into darkness, the kind that feels alive, pressing in from all sides. I fumbled for my phone, the only source of light I had, but my hands were shaking too badly to hold on to it. It slipped from my grasp, clattering to the floor. I heard footsteps, slow, deliberate, coming closer. I scrambled to my feet, stumbling in the dark, my hands outstretched to find something, anything to hold on to. The footsteps grew louder, echoing in the enclosed space. I backed away, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst. Then, out of the darkness, a hand grabbed my wrist. It was cold, impossibly cold, like the touch of death itself. I screamed, yanking my arm away, but the grip was like iron, unyielding. The lights flickered back on for a brief moment, and I saw the figure standing in front of me. Its face was hidden in shadow, but I could feel its eyes on me, watching, waiting. The train lurched, throwing me off balance. I hit the floor hard, the impact jarring. The hand released me, and I scrambled back, desperate to put distance between myself and the figure. The lights flickered again, and when they came back on, the figure was gone. I was alone in the car once more, but the terror didn't fade. I could still feel the cold imprint of that hand on my wrist, the lingering sense of being watched. The train continued on, the journey stretching into an eternity. I had lost all sense of time, of direction. The tunnel outside was nothing but a blur, a void that seemed to swallow everything. I don't know how long I was on that train. It could have been hours, or days, or even years. Time didn't seem to exist in that place. I was trapped in a never-ending loop of darkness and fear, with no way out. And then, just as suddenly as it had started, the train came to a halt. The doors slid open with a hiss, revealing a platform bathed in an eerie, unnatural light. I stumbled out, my legs shaky, my mind reeling. The platform was empty, just like the train, and there was no sign of where I was or how I had gotten there. I turned back to look at the train, but it was gone. The tracks stretched on into the darkness, leading to nowhere. I was alone, with only the oppressive silence and the cold, lingering fear to keep me company. To this day, I don't know what happened on that train. I never told anyone about it, never tried to explain the inexplicable, but I don't take the subway anymore. I can't. The memory of that night haunts me, the fear clinging to me like a shadow. And sometimes, when the night is dark and the fog rolls in, I hear it. The distant sound of a train, a low rumble that seems to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. And I know that somewhere out there, the train is still running, waiting for its next passenger.